Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ashlee Harrison. I'm the Curatorial Director for this first edition of Design Miami. And we're here today to discuss collecting design, contemporary perspectives. I have joining us today a few very dear friends across the discipline of design that will be speaking together, and hopefully at the end there'll be some great engaging conversation and questions that we can all delve into. First, we have Simon Haas, artist and designer, Los Angeles based. We have Wendy Kaplan, who's the department head and curator of the Decorative Arts and Design at LACMA. We have Alison Palevsky, who is a fantastic interior designer and a collector herself, and Johanna Grawunder, a recovering architect and artist and designer. So I guess we get right into it, thinking about the definition of how would you define collectible design? What is collectible to you? And I'm going to start with Wendy.
Well, because I am a curator and very image dependent, I did bring a whole slew of slides to demonstrate what in my role as department head at LACMA, I think is collectible design. This is an entirely subjective point of view, and also dependent on geography, which will become clear in about 2 minutes. So I want other people to weigh in first.
For me, collectible design is elevated design, something that makes a room that I'm designing feel special and makes it more publishable. It has a thought process behind it, and I think that I fall in love with collectible design when I go to a studio or find someone new in the practice, and I really understand what it is they're making. So for me, I'm interested in an object that feels different and new, and that I feel will hold its value as time goes on.
So as a designer, you can't really say, I'm making collectible design. You make design, and then hopefully someone up here, whether it's a gallery or a museum or someone commissions something, then it becomes collectible. So I kind of feel like I have to skip this question about what makes it collectible.
And I can say, Joanna, that we've done some great commissions together, and they are definitely collectible. And from my perspective, just as a former gallerist and collaborating with both artists, with institutions, and with interior designers and collectors, we're looking at specific principles of course, there's the idea of it, the scarcity, but there's also the high integrity of the object, the craftsmanship, the innovation of thought or idea, materiality of process. The very strong, from my school, it's like there was always a very strong artistic narrative or concept driving the form, and it has to be, I think, relevant to the culture. So that's where I would start off. But Wendy, I know that you have some great insight into this.
Well, because when you work at a museum, you have to be careful because you have been chosen for the job because there's faith in your judgment and your taste. On the other hand, you are collecting for posterity. There's there are a lot more stakeholders than your personal taste, if your personal taste is in fact a stakeholder. But of course, you're going to bring your own passions and interests. But even despite that, if you are a curator at an encyclopedic museum and your own department's collection is European and American, medieval to the present, there will be different criteria. And one is what resonates in an encyclopedic museum. And what resonates, one very important thing, are objects that are in dialogue with the past. So I call your attention to this image from a recent exhibition we had at LACMA, Conversing in Clay, which is 14 pairs of ceramics, all from LACMA's collection in dialogue with each other. So first, Roberto Lugo's take on the iconic Century vase, which was a vase made for the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial, celebrating our 100 years as a nation. And it could not be more bombastic and patriotic. And to have Roberto's take, bringing it up to the present, resonates, taking the same form, and you can see what he did with it. Next is Elise Pignolet's Trophy Wife, which evokes traditional forms, and tin-glazed earthenware, which has been a material used for many centuries. And with doing this, she creates very powerful statements about the exploitation of women. Next is Stephen Young Lee, and his is, I just call it inspired appropriation. And look carefully, because you see Tony the Tiger from Kellogg's Frosted Flakes is replacing centuries-old symbols of power. And it's also a tiny bit of a problem when you're only using your collection. In an ideal world, our 17th century example would have been a tiger, but we settled for a dragon because we had it, and it makes the same point. So that's one category, are works that are in direct dialogue, and it can be technique. It doesn't have to be a political statement of any kind. It's just, those are the easiest, those are the splashiest. The second category, and something as I'm sure you're all aware of, our museum's commitment to giving greater representation to underrepresented groups. So next, please. There's a lot of very exciting work coming out of Africa. We just acquired this Marcus Bellows bench with bowl at our department fundraiser on Thursday. We acquired it from the gallery Marta, who's represented at the fair. Check them out. And earlier in 2019, we acquired two of Zizi Pozwa's first ceramic sculptures. And you can see her more recent work outside and at the Southern Guild's booth right here. Next, please. We're also focusing on work coming out of the African diaspora, which evokes both Black lives and African landscapes. The Teague piece on the left, the Teague piece is from Reform Gallery, also at the fair. You really have brought together the big guns.
Yeah.
And Yomo Tariko is now represented by the Wexler Gallery, but we acquired the chair directly for him, from him before he had representation. So good for us.
And there's a great piece of Tariko's upstairs as well.
Yes,
the podium.
yes, and I hope you've seen Ashlee's wonderful survey upstairs, which is really a hall of masterworks. And if you haven't, head right up there. And next is Woody Dothello, where this work evokes face jugs that were first made in the 19th century by enslaved Black potters in South Carolina. Another underrepresented group is Native American, and here we have Sarah Rosalina Brady and works that were acquired. These are works that were acquired through other support groups at LACMA. Oh, one thing when you keep seeing DA squared, I hope you're carefully reading the credit lines here. That is our department support group, without whom we could not acquire anything at all. So it's wonderful because LACMA's the biggest museum in this country that does not have an endowment for acquisitions. So basically, my job is half scholar, half geisha, and and it seems to be working. So Sarah Rosalina Brady is a Native American artist who's right here in Los Angeles. Next is Anina Major, who weaves clay to evoke Native American fishing nets. And next, oh, it got left out. Wait,
it's
next.
just my clicking is there.
Oh, yeah, great, okay. Guillermo Burt, and this was purchased also directly from him. And he is a wonderful Latin American from Chile, but he is talking about migrant crossings on the top of trains, which is a very evocative story and one that can be revealed through the QR code that's woven into the piece. So this, another category, of course, we're in Southern California. We overrepresent California designers. I mean, this would not be quite the strategy if I was at the Met or the MFA Boston, but it's very much the strategy at LACMA, and it should be. And I love this work by John Cedarquist because he lives in Orange County. He himself was inspired by a 1992 exhibition at LACMA about kimonos, and he was then inspired by an exhibition at the Bard in New York, was called Wearing Propaganda, which was about kimono designs that were in response to contemporary politics. So he came up with this fabulous chest of drawers. Next is Eni Archibong, and this is an artist who lives in Switzerland but is from Pasadena, and this amazing switch table was inspired by lowriders that he saw growing up. So again, and we got this from the Friedman Benda Gallery, also here. And Guillermo Bart, Sarah Rosalina Brady also have their practices in LA. So that ticks multiple boxes. Plus, you can visit their studios. And so that's another advantage that California designers and artists have, is that, you can say, come see us, and we do. And then the fourth category is just what I like. I mean, I like all of it. But, anybody who says they love their children equally is not telling the truth. And next, I love anything that has a story that comes out of the arts and crafts movement, which is a field I've spent a couple of decades writing about. And I love the little pieces of brick on this bench, and I don't have time to go into the whole story. You can ask me later. And I love Dutch design next for its amazing combination of beauty and function. The other curators in the department who collect this field even more are they're more oriented towards things that are I consider more fine art, and it's not like one's better than the other, but they're completely non-functional, and it's just I like designs that are also utilitarian, and that's the Dutch do that so well. This is a great example. Theo Remy and his wife, and I forgot the other guy's name, but it's recycled wool blankets. That's why it's called the accidental carpet and poof. And it was commissioned to create a more pleasant environment for children being treated for epilepsy at a clinic in the Netherlands. And then through Ashlee, we acquired this amazing piece by Studio Drift. Okay, Holly will shut up for a while.
Oh, no. I think it's actually good for us to start off with this because it's giving you a really wide range of work that's collected by the institution and for what reasons. And I think ultimately it is also what is the place and time and in history that these works have. And I think that in many cases is validated as a testament through the museums. You know, what is going to remain, what's going to be shown, and what's put out there to the public, where in many cases when you're working with interior designers or with private collectors, it's going into someone's home and you might not ever see that again. So also something that you brought up kind of through this conversation that we were all talking about earlier was about how do you identify these designers and these works? Because how do you choose who the next rising star is? Because many of these artists you discovered before they were even with the galleries. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. And I know, Alison, you play a role in that discovery as well.
Well, there's no one story. Sometimes, you have friends who say, you should know about this work. As I mentioned, it helps if you live in LA because, or at least within an hour and a half of driving, because then it's so easy to go to the studio and see the work there. And I give Design Miami points for having gallery representation at their fairs by up-and-coming galleries who might not be able to afford the full. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I know I've gotten work out of from seeing it at Design Miami, but they're not the super. The galleries that have been around a long time. They're the up and coming. So you do an amazing service.
Design Miami has a program called Curator, and that's given to up and coming, like emerging artist talent and up and coming galleries to be able to present work. So I think that is actually a great way to foster rising stars and talent in the community, and that's great to hear it from you as well.
It is, because it was truly last Christmas last December is when I saw that amazing bench, and because Marta had a booth there, so it was weird to be in Miami to see this African work from an LA gallery.
And Alison, I know that you've also been with Wendy have done a number of acquisitions, but where do you see finding the inspiration and the talent, and what's your role in that acquisitions process?
Well, my role in Wendy's group, DA Squared, is kind of half student and half patron. Just so, Wendy, I think we probably need to explain what the group does a bit. So DA Squared at LACMA is the support group, and we pay a due every year. Part of that dues goes to what we call the pot, or a fund, and we meet once a year, and the 4 curators present us 8 to 12 objects. And as Wendy said, there are 4 different points of view, so their interests are really quite different. So we get anything from things you would see at Design Miami to, we just acquired a Bauhaus ashtray. So it depends on what the curator's perspective is, and then we get a vote. So we rank the objects 1 through 8 or 1 through 12, each member. And at the end of the night, we have a certain amount of money that's already, quote unquote, in the pot. And the top 3 or 4 things may cover those objects. But then if the things that you feel very passionate about don't get purchased through the collective fund, as a patron, you can say, oh, I fell in love with that piece, I fell in love with the story, and you have the opportunity to be a supporter and to give the gift of the acquisition to the museum, which is important, and it does give us a voice beyond the group as well. So the group has a voice, and then you have your own voice. And then in terms of your question about discovering new artists, I'm curious. I like to know what's around every corner. So I try to go and see everything. I'm friends with a lot of artists, and absolutely I find artists through artists, because sometimes they just don't have the means to make what they would love to make, or they don't have the means to fabricate it. So they'll say, oh, you should go see so-and-so's studio. And I go, and I would say, see everything, see the young galleries, see the makers, talk to artists. But to give credit to Design Miami, I was walking it on Thursday morning or Wednesday night, and I was in Salon 94, and I discovered Jae Se-jung Oh, which had a piece that was up for I think it's called the recycled lamppost, and it was one of the objects that they presented to us at the acquisitions meeting on Thursday night. So I didn't know the work and the story behind it of this artist who collects plastic and then tapes them into a piece of sculpture and weaves with leather cord over them and creates these incredible works. If you haven't seen them, go up and see it. I didn't know this artist, and I said to the gallerist, oh, when Bobby Tigerman would love this at LACMA, and she said, oh, I think it's actually on your, they're presenting it to you tonight. So that's kind of how I discover new works and new artists.
That's great. I think also one of the things that we were wanting to talk about was like what are you evaluating, or what are the principles that you're looking for when you're looking for something that is collectible? Do you want to touch a little bit on that?
So, the first question that a client asked me is, if I'm not buying it for myself, because I buy things for myself, but if I'm not buying it for myself and I'm buying it for a client, they are going to ask you, do you think this is going to hold its value? And of course, my response is, I don't think that's the reason that you should buy it. I think you need to love it, and you need to love the process, and that you shouldn't be thinking about reselling it before you even buy it. But if you come to a point where, you are going to resell it, I think it's really important to go back to the gallery and to protect the artist so that it doesn't end up in the abyss or on a platform where it shouldn't be. I think that everyone in this room, if you're at this fair, you probably have a strong interest in collectible design, and knowing what it is, and knowing that there needs to be. I look for the fact that there's a limited amount being made as well. I think it's important not to buy something that they're making a lot of. So if it's edition, that's another criteria for me, and I'm sure Simon can probably speak to this as well, about how they edition work and how you keep it so that the work of the artist evolves over time and it's not the same thing over and over.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a consideration. It's something I don't like to try to plan into my own work, but I've experienced it a lot just from discussions about how rare something is. And I also sort of came up in an environment where I was buying and selling music equipment with my brother, and it's a very similar situation. Serial numbers are really important, that kind of thing. As an artist, I don't so much consider it, but I have experienced the effects of if I make a larger edition or unique piece. Generally, my brother and I only make unique pieces, but we have several editioned objects, and I would say that the unique ones are more collectible.
Definitely. And then there's variant, and I guess it's also open to your interpretation that one person is going to respond more to one type of work than another. So then it creates more of a breadth and an evolution, you could say, as opposed to being kind of monotone of the one. I don't want to call it one hit wonder, but I think it's also the role of the gallerist and to collaborate and push the artist and to see the evolution of the work, and to also know when to pull back too, right? And say, okay, we like what Alison, what you were saying. There's too much of it out there, and there hasn't been an evolution. Then you don't really know where the artist is going.
But I think,
sorry, go on.
I think that the Haas brothers are such a good example of artists whose work has evolved so much. I mean, I remember seeing Simon's series Afriques, and then before that, even seeing I think the first piece I ever fell in love with was called Oscar the Couch, which was the furry with the legs. And to see where they've come now, showing pieces, the show that they just did with Deitch and Marianne Boesky, the way the work has evolved over time, it feels fresh, and it feels like it is 8 to 10 years later. And I think that's so important because you're not collecting the same thing, and you're giving your, your fan base, your collector base, something new to choose from. And I think sometimes artists get stuck into being, you get pigeonholed into being, oh, that he just works with ceramics. And their studio is fascinating because they have so many different media. So, ceramics. So I'll let you go.
No, I mean, that's a good point. And we're also really, Nikki and I never stop having ideas or wanting to make things, so slowing ourselves down isn't going to happen organically. So I think that the process of evolution there is natural when you're making so many things happen in your studio. But yes, I have a sense for when something is sort of has been put out a little too much, and I will pull back if I can see that.
Yeah, I think that you've done a good job at pumping the brakes and making people want more.
Good.
I guess with that in mind, I want to just go into a couple of examples of how you've collaborated together. So I know the next, how did you come to? I was here with the acquisitions of both Johanna's work. I'm sorry, I'm not really good at this with the clicker. There we go. With the acquisition of both Johanna's work and of Simon's, because both the Haas brothers and Johanna Grawunder are in the collection of LACMA, and in many ways, it's been a process of collaboration, right?
Oh, well, not with the museum.
Mm-hmm.
That's just been, Johanna and I got to know each other a very long time ago. Johanna used to work with Ettore Sottsass in his firm. LACMA was doing an exhibition on Ettore Sottsass, funded by Alison's father-in-law. So it's all this incestuous little circle here. And so then I got to know Johanna's work and just loved it. And as I mentioned, so it was one of the pieces that the very first meeting of DA Square acquired. And because in the group are people who are passionate about design, like you're not passionate without wanting it for your own home. Alison and her husband Sasha love the work, and you can take it from here, please.
So that was actually back in 2012. I think it was the very first DA Squared and the beginning. So I feel very lucky that I've been a member of this group of Wendy's since the beginning. But what happened was there was a work presented, and I happened to be sitting next to Johanna, and I was building a house, and I was trying to explain that I wanted to basically build I was very enamored with the Dolores Del Rio house that Cedric Gibbons had done down in the Santa Monica Canyon, but I knew that I should never try to recreate an Art Deco house in the current times, and I don't really love when anyone tries to do that. So we were building a modern house, and I was really struggling. I love lighting. Lighting to me is the jewelry of a home, and Johanna is masterful at lighting. And I was explaining to her that I had this very a tall hallway, and we had designed these pair of doors. The architect, not myself, had designed the pair of doors that were essentially mirrors of each other, and they were very Mondrian. And I asked Johanna if she could come look at the space and to give her thoughts on what she thought might fill the space. And I'm going to let you take this one from here.
I just flash forward to the image of your home with.
So this is the piece that we ended up doing together. So I just want to take a step back real quick and say the ecosystem that's up here is actually fairly new. The whole idea of museum and collector/designer commissioning and gallery. Mm-hmm. And, the whole fact that I was able to do a commission with Alison came through this museum, let's say, validation of what art design is, because until that moment, you know, Design Miami existed, and it's been really good for me to be able to show internationally. But there really wasn't this whole support system around it. And as soon as museums like LACMA started collecting contemporary art design, it validated it so that, as Alison said, she has clients asking, you know, should I collect this? Is it going to be worth it? And her answer is, well, you have to love it first. And I still think that's the case. So I do mostly custom commissions, and that's what this was with Alison. The reason I do that is because, as Ashlee said, I'm a recovering architect. With Sotsas, I was doing architecture for 20 years. And then I realized I could get much, much quicker gratification through design, a couple months instead of 5 or 10 years, and no codes. I mean, it's so much more fun, and it's so much more, you know, quick way to, if you really want to develop your own aesthetic language, your own aesthetic program, what you're trying to say with your materials, colors, and in my case, light. This was the way to do it. So with Alison, we did look at the space. It wasn't finished at the time. You had drawings. Met with her architect, Cass Calder-Smith, who is San Francisco-based, I think, as well, and New York, and just found this affinity. And, you know, Alison is also a collector of things Distille. So, in fact, this piece, I kind of was kind of a prostitute move a little bit. I called it Distille, you know, and it's got all the right angles and everything. But the main idea was to fill the space with a volume and to have it be something that during the day kind of disappears. But it's still sort of sculptural, like just light shards coming in, and then at night it lights up and fills that space. So it was a really fantastic site-specific collaboration.
Are there any night views? It's so amazing at night.
It is amazing at night. But also it's important because this is a great example of a multifunctional piece where it really exists as a piece of sculpture during the day. I know I'm looking there at that image and you guys are looking this way, but in the day it just floats, and Johanna was brilliant and she used a piece of polished stainless on the actual panel it hangs from. So if you're standing under it or you're walking through it night or day, it does have that infinity and like effect. And it's a piece of sculpture, and then at night it is a functional light that lights that entire gallery space. So I love that, you know, it is both crossing the line between like functional and, you know, it's both. It's two things at once. So this was a wonderful, yes.
Yeah, I want to add one thing that people who commission designers to do specific things, there's a special place in paradise for you, because I think Simon would probably agree with that.
Well, it probably gives you the ability to like really push your own boundaries too artistically, and to see where you can go, like how far you can go.
Yeah, but one more thing. So the third leg of the stool with the museums and the collectors or people who commission things is the galleries. And, you know, Ashlee is here representing the world of galleries. And I have to say that I always looked at that when that whole scene first started. And my first show was in 1993, so that was a while ago. Before anyone really knew what we were doing, that it became kind of like, we thought of it as the research arm of design. So you had product design, and then you had this thing that the galleries were doing, including Carpenter's Workshop Gallery, where Ashlee was for years, as the research arm, because you didn't have to do a product that necessarily had to appeal to 1 million people. It could just appeal to one person, or it could appeal to 6 people in the entire world. And through the fairs, like Design Miami, those 6 people might be in the same building at the same time and see this. So the gallery is a really important part, and Ashlee in particular, probably put more of my stuff in the world than anyone.
Thank you. We had a lot of fun doing commissions. I think that a lot of the commissions, the conversation started off of your project, Alison, with Johanna. I think that in my early days of collaborating with Johanna was a kind of a touch point in conversations.
And I would love to see more of Johanna's work in a show, and just have more of your work out there for people to see, because it is so great.
Me too.
Well, there is a piece upstairs, a new piece that you've created that was an evolution of a piece like this, similar like this. It's called Meteorite, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a piece upstairs in the podium show, and I know also Simon has a number of works here at Carpenter's Workshop. That we can also, I know that there was a few more questions that we had with Simon and your how you ended up going back. That we just went through the conversation about how all of us have collaborated with Johanna, but also how you've acquired the Haas brothers and your collaboration starting with that.
Well, just because the whole ecosystem, could you just go back one more to Joanna? Okay, because this was Joanna's Geolite was acquired through DA Squared, but then the companies who make it are happy. Joanna's happy, and then you get donations, which is amazing. And this came in through the storage units came in through the company, and then Joanna very generously gave us this. I didn't have a picture of it, sadly, so I would. The office chair for the new economy, which is
It's a
nothing
Chase
like you would
Lounge.
imagine. Oh, okay. I was giving it its formal name. Anyway, she donated that, and then luckily for us, could you please go to the Haas brothers? Their gallery at the time, R & Company, very kindly arranged with the Haas brothers this donation of the Father accretion vases. Now, museums, like they say, oh, it was a gift. It is even more significant. For one thing, you can't afford to take something you don't like, because when you take an object into the collection, you are committing to storing it and taking care of it forever. And so, as we know to our sorrow, nothing in life is free. And so we're very happy to have it as a gift, but take seriously the responsibility, to getting it out there. And this particular piece has you can explain the incredible nature of how it was made. This ceramic, it's the most laborious moving story, which we don't, sadly, but go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Tell the short version.
The short version of this ceramic is, well, first off, thanks for accepting a gift of something that's so hard to take care of, because these are really, really fragile. But it is a ceramic process of brushing really wet. It's slip. If you don't know what that is, it's really wet clay. You brush it onto the surface of a vessel. Actually, Ben Medansky is right over here. He helped me early on with. He worked in our ceramic studio early. We just brush clay onto a surface over and over and over until it starts to grow. I had a sense that something would happen if you do anything over and over. It'll have there will be a result, and I wanted to see what that result was. Beyond that, these pieces I'm really interested in because they have fully lost their function. The vase necks are bent over, so you can't really put anything in them. And what I loved about this surface technique in the first place is it's so fragile that you can't actually pick them up. And if you put water in them, it would make it harder. So they were already not that practical. But they really hold on to like a vaseness that is important to the piece.
So this kind of blends the idea of functional versus non-functional, how far you push the boundary between how do you categorize it then? And did it naturally start to bend over into the non-functional aspect through the repetition of the glazing, or is that something that you had intended the entire time?
On these ones, it's intentional.
Okay.
It depends on the object. Sometimes early on we were trying to make them fully functional.
Mm-hmm.
I have one that I use as a paper, like a wastebasket.
Right.
But it's beautiful. I think that Nikki and I got interested in using functionality as sort of a punchline.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say that Design Miami has been very open-minded in allowing us to show a lot of these pieces. They are certainly not functional objects, but I think for me, that doesn't mean I'm not a designer.
Right.
The process is very designed. I'm really obsessed with craft. These are design objects, even though they're not functional. And I think our love for design is what created these vases, non-vases in the first place.
Kind of like you can force the function in it, but you might break the piece.
You could put a bendy flower in there.
Yeah, bendy flower. So that's actually a really good a kind of starting point, because you, I see as a more of a multidisciplinary artist, and I think that for so long we were always trying to categorize artists into a box, but Nikki and Simon have done a really beautiful job of kind of breaking that mold and being able to be in both places simultaneously. You just opened a show a few weeks ago with MIAMI.LA. You're showing here at Design Miami. What was that like, even going back, I don't know, to a few years ago when you were showing at the Convention Center at Boski, and then also with your gallery at the time of design? Are you thinking about different types of work? Is the gallery and where it's ending up dictating the process of how you're creating the work, or is it something that you just like naturally let it unfold and then it evolves into?
We will make the work no matter what. And I think that's maybe a probably common experience with collectible designers and designers in general. You kind of need to make the work.
Truly, you're blending into, you're an artist.
Yes, and we don't we don't so much consider where it will wind up unless it is a commission or something site specific. The question of what the boundary is, or like which one are you going to send where, is is a very old question. Similarly old is the question of what is art in the first place. Right. That's pretty hard to define. I think design is a lot easier to say. It has a function, it serves a purpose. But I would argue that art also serves a purpose. It's usually a more emotional purpose. Or I think that something beautiful serves a purpose of making you feel better. So they both are they're both kind of functional. So the experience of having them at both fairs is something we were hoping for a long time. The first time we showed at Art Basel, it was a table, which I thought was kind of cool. We were made to put books on top of it to show how functional it is. I think really that question is more down to it's a natural instinct to want to categorize things so that you can process them. And I don't fault anyone for doing that, but I don't really care.
Right. That's a good place to be. And I think, Johanna, I just to touch on your work as well, and I'll go back to, I think, these images, that there is something very emotional about it when you're experiencing your work. It is, in a way, like this. Like, I think you, as being a Cali girl, that I spent a lot of time in Milan. There's an influence between Memphis, but also this California light and space. So sometimes your work is so immersive that it has emotional reaction. And I think that's something as beautiful, is that you can blend into both worlds, although you do come to it as a perspective as a designer.
Well, thank you for that. I would say difference with Simon is that I don't really feel like I work as an artist, in the sense that I'm not self-starting. I need the parameters of a client or a specific space or a function. I kind of need that sort of stimulation and inspiration to get me going. I think that's, again, coming from architecture background. So, you know, with Ashlee, we've done a lot of site-specific work. In fact, this is a piece in Miami in a house. And it was a fantastic collaboration because she had seen some of my work. She liked, you know, something, but then we started talking about different artists. And she showed us that video of, and I can't remember the name of the artist, who basically makes a movie of a ham sandwich just backwards, coming apart, and they're all flying up in the air. And she's like, you know, something like that. So we took a kind of a more classic piece of mine and sort of started taking the baloney off as it went up. And it was a new thing, and that's what happens with these collaborations, specifically the site-specific ones. The people, every time a person is different, so you're getting this dialogue. And for me, that's how I get the new ideas through that, is the opportunity coming from the galleries and then working specifically with different people. And color, that's in my DNA. You don't work with Sotsas for 16 years and become a black and white minimalist. Just not going to happen. So,
Now, I know we're gearing towards the end of our time, but I did want to get into some conversations maybe about the vetting process, authentication, like all of that. But I also want to open up questions for the audience, or if there's anything that you want to know particularly from us about the way that we work together or individually. Yeah. Oh, wait. Well, maybe. Okay, first Natalie, and then we'll go to the back.
Hi. Great talk, you guys. So just a question from everybody here. Where do you see the future of the whole design art scenario going? Do you have any sort of wishes, hopes, dreams, fears? I'm just curious to kind of gauge the pulse.
well, I can say I tried AI, and I went into, I think it was Dolly or something, and I put my name in chandelier, and what came out was something with horns. Yeah.
Wait, that's
And
hilarious.
I realized it wasn't quite ready. This was like 6 months ago. Now I'm afraid to do it now because I'm sure it's better. So I don't think the future is AI. That might be the only thing we can all sigh of relief about AI. But for me, I think it's going to be materials research and just figuring out how to make things that have value and, as Ashlee was saying, emotion, and with things that are more and more sustainable. And also, as Simon was saying, you're making heirlooms. So don't make things that you buy and throw away the next day. I came here with an IKEA bag with a pillow in it, but that's a bad example, let's say.
I agree with you. I'm really into the conscious consumption, and how I'm working with clients now is really helping them to identify pieces that they will not only evolve with, but that they could also consider that their children can evolve with. And if it doesn't end up with their children, that they could still have a new life. Exactly.
I also think that, just having Design Miami present in Los Angeles, we have been wanting a fair like this here for a long time. And I think we're kind of, so everyone's been so receptive to it and has welcomed it. And I think that's true about the whole idea of collectible design. There's been lots of talk about secondary market with fine art. I think the secondary market with collectible design is complicated a bit in terms of where pieces go after, if the first user wants to then find another market for them. But I think that a lot of people are coming around to the importance of it and the importance of buying interior designers, educating their clients, and putting, at least if you're gonna do a project, make sure you have one or two collectible pieces in there, because it will shape the room. I've been so inspired walking through the fair. I could design a room around the Casey McCaffrey console, or so they're just, I think it's up to people in the field to really start to educate everyone about how important it is to have collectible design, and not to have it, to buy the real thing, and not to buy the reproduction version, and to really protect the artists that are making the work. So for the future for me would be to put a lot of value on protecting the artists and making sure that it ends up in the right places.
And I think that speaking to that, you don't have to have $1 million budget to buy something that's collectible. I think you can invest in younger artists. You can find pieces that might also be artists that are undervalued or undersupported, and it's just what you resonate with,
I think that there's $6,500 Carpenter Workshop small pieces of the Haas brothers. So that's just a good example for someone who's aspirational or just starting to begin a collection. There's definitely pieces, and it's so important to me that clients buy something that's real. Or even when you're talking about like the Privé and Perrion, like all of these other designers, like I think it's important, like try to buy the real thing. It's not actually often that much more money. So for me, that's the future for me to me.
And I think that's something that we collectively as an industry have to get behind and push, and to continue to educate and move forward.
And I have the same hope for the future that people continue to. Well, first, I also don't like AI, so I'm glad you said that. It can do certain things, but don't come for us. Writers and artists, I don't think need to be replaced by a computer. But I hope for a continued interest in collecting collectible designers, artists. There's a long-standing tradition of collecting paintings. I understand that for sure. I'm really happy to see that design is becoming such a big collectible market, largely driven by Design Miami. And I think that it's really amazing when curators and museums and galleries are educating people and encouraging them to continue collecting, because I'd love to see the next generation continue to collect.
I think it's so much about the education process. So like it's a large majority about what we do. It's not just selling. It's the educating and being like little soldiers on the ground. I know Jira, you had a question back there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a two-part question. I have a kind of a two-part question, and I'll keep it brief. The first part is a little more specific and kind of like selfish as like a new designer, and then the second one is a little more general for like other new designers. So one of the things you touched on, so I am Native American, I'm Chickasaw Nation, and I'm also like of North African descent, and I create work that's not really about that. It's not really about my heritage necessarily. It's more conceptual. And I wonder if there's kind of like that room for kind of like that individual approach and like not specifically making it about like that kind of like heritage and more of like kind of like a conceptual approach. And then the second thing is when you discover like newer designers or you go to their studios, do you go in looking for something that's like ready to go and something that's like at that standard already, or do you have like this, are you able to look and say like I see where they're going with this and kind of like I guess just find that interest in designers who have a clear direction but they're still new and things like that? Like do you have openness to those early stage or earlier stages? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, is this directed towards Wendy?
No, well, the first part I can address I showed work by Native American, African American designer / artists who are they're passionate about their cultural heritage, but that isn't the only thing they have to say. I didn't go into Sarah Rosalina Brady, whose work I showed both in textiles and ceramics. She is Native American. She's incredibly passionate about Mars and space. I don't even understand her full title, which is she's a professor of haptic. Do you remember what that? It's anyway. Point is, I talked about the stuff that is so easily communicated because you can see it there. Given the time frame, if I had to go into explaining Sarah's work, you would never get your afternoon coffee, and so that was it was and also in many underrepresented groups are passionate about sharing their heritage through their objects, but it's by no means the qualification for acquisition.
Can I just, sorry, quickly say that, by the way, that wasn't really directed at what you showed in general. That was that was just me, like, as far as like observing and kind of like me learning, like, kind of like navigating galleries and things like that, and just like not specifically about what you showed. It wasn't directed.
Oh no, I didn't view it. No, I didn't view it that way. I just wanted, in noting it, I just wanted to explain that when you only have like 5 minutes for your spiel, I probably went over, but that you better pick something that's like, oh, readily identified.
Well, I had an interesting conversation with, I'm not a gallerist, never know in the future, but I was talking to one the other night, and the conversation was exactly what you're asking about. I was asking, when I'm going to a fine art fair, I'll often go to the Blue Chip Convention Center and look at that. And then there's always a handful of fairs that are the side fairs of the work that hasn't quite gotten to the point where it's in the convention center. And we were talking about the differences of like what ends up in the convention center and what isn't. And I asked him, well, how I don't want to say his name, but he's represented here, his gallery is here. And he said, often we buy the earliest work of an artist that we're interested in, and we keep it, we hold it, because we know that they'll evolve and the work gets better and better over time. And a lot of it comes down to fabrication, whereas in the beginning you're probably not, as a young artist, able to put the funds fully into it if you don't have a gallery behind you. And the fabrication process, as you become more and more established, gets better and better and better. So the work gets better and better and better. But I think that the galleries, particularly the ones here, they know that, and they go to the schools and they're interested in the young artists. So they are willing to work with you, and they see that there's a future if there's talent and it's work that they like.
Yeah, I think like you're right on with that. That a lot of the times, and we've had a conversation about this before, that it's seeing what's possible, like the potential of what the ideas. You see like the glimpse of something, and then it's collaborating to kind of push that to evolve and give the platform to have the opportunity to evolve. And I think that comes with time and resources, and with having somebody that believes in you.
Oh, and LACMA has a program called Art Here and Now, which is another collecting program that's run out of the Contemporary Art Department. Just something you all should know about, but especially if you're an artist here trying to get better known. So it's the same thing where people, donors put in a certain amount of money to belong to the group. They go on like 6 gallery visits a year. And then the money is used to purchase objects from those They vote on which ones will actually be purchased by the museum, and then the work goes into the museum, but it's specifically for younger people who might not have representation, and it's just specifically going to their galleries, and it's called Art Here and Now.
That's a great platform. And also residency programs. I think that there's more and more design-focused residency programs. And
Do you know about Kohler? Oh, sorry.
No, please
Sorry,
jump
it's just
right
this
into
is
it.
the-
You got really excited there, Wendy.
Only because can you have a crush on a company?
An orange toilet. That's right outside.
I do have a crush on the company because they are very enlightened, and they give out 6 fellowships, residencies, as long as you're okay about Sheboygan, which is actually a nicer place than I thought. But they give out residencies in ceramics and metalwork, because obviously they have a foundry and a porcelain works there. You do not have to be a ceramicist. When I was visiting, they had a filmmaker there. They had it's basically, you get an incredible free ride, access to their incredible resources, and a platform, and they give out, I think, 6 a year. And it's just, if you're young and ambitious, it really behooves you to spend some time, because this is by no means the only, it's a very unusual program, but there are many residencies that support young artists, and you should just check it out.
Also, the Haas brothers have been coming to this idea of getting behind supporting young artists too.
Yes, I mean we don't have that facility yet, but we are working at that. It's in the making, and we've been the lucky recipients of getting to go to residencies. We recently went to Pilchuck, and it's a glass school. It's incredible. I'm not a glass blower. I learned so much, and I have shifted my focus to glass a lot. I want Kohler too. I like orange toilets. But you had a question about, do you have to have finished pieces in the studio? Is that right? Or just ideas?
resolved.
I mean, yeah, I think that when you make a final piece, the production quality should be very high. But as far as being able to make those things, I know from experience that it's really expensive as someone who's making furniture objects or lighting or sculptures. It's much, much more expensive than being a painter, for example. So you might not be able to make that piece unless you find a patron or someone who's willing to commission. And that's where, like, God bless all of the people who commission things, or a museum who will take a leap on an artist and allow you to make something that you've been dreaming of for years and not able to do. But yes, I think just as long as you have something to show, that's the most important part.
Yeah, I want to say one thing is there's a concept of productive capability. So, you know, when I first started, the galleries didn't want to spend a lot of money either. So we ended up having to deal more with concept than craftsmanship. And anyway, even that, I would work with corrugated metal or something, you know, with bolts and stuff like that. Just having to deal with the productive capability that you have underhand, but still be able to use your conceptual basis and develop that and your aesthetic vision. I think that's, you know, I think it's probably how we all started at that. And then eventually you get, you know, these whole resources that we're talking about today. And sometimes that's the most interesting work, I think, is this stuff that, you know, you just go to the hardware store and figure it out kind of thing.
All right. So is there any other questions out there that I want to ask? Or one last question.
I have a question. I had a printer design at Master Studio in LA. I had a interior design at Master Studio here in LA, and my question was, when do you think is it time to bring in the conversation about having design objects come into the projects? Is it when we're talking about art, or when we're talking about the design furniture? Because, you know, we have kind of separation of different activities during the project, you know, the specifying of furniture, the specifying of lighting, and, you know, that we have conversations with consultants, and, you know, art consultant, it seems to be like something somewhat either at the tail end, and it seems like design should come a little bit before.
I think they should both be considered in the beginning of the project, and you have to have that conversation with the client to set the expectations and start to educate them and get them excited about it.
Yeah.
So that when it gets to the point where you are specifying for objects or for lighting, or especially lighting comes a lot earlier because of the technicality about what you have to do with
Right.
installation. So the earlier the better, in my opinion,
Yeah.
just to set forth that expectation.
We have gone through through a project that we have done all three: lighting, art,
And putting
art,
aside
art
budget
project
too. 'Cause
And it's kind of I think a conversation that starts in the beginning, but it has to be consistently addressed throughout, because, you know, then the emphasis and budgets change. And so it would be great to see people like you be more involved with the practice of
and use us too.
yeah.
I think so.
Exactly.
It's really important to have us come in and do our dog and pony shows and educate with you
For
or
sure.
share with you, because we can speak probably deeper to the information that gets your client excited about
Yes.
it, and then we can do that together.
for sure.
Yeah. I love putting the artist in front of clients.
That's what I was going to say, is anytime I've ever put the client in the studio with the artist, Simon, I mean, how I literally met Simon, I went to the Haas Brothers studio and I'd seen the work, but I don't really think I ever understood the work until I walked it. And Simon's process, his mind, the way that he works, we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but he does incredible beaded work, and the process that he uses to code and bead the work is incredible. And when I learned about it, like, you simply couldn't not be excited about the process behind it. And that for me is always like what sells the work to the client, because then they're excited and they want to build the space around it, or
I feel like Johanna might understand because you've worked in architecture. Sometimes it's a time constraint, and they may not be have that in the radar until it's much later. And so, ideally, yes, much earlier on, to start these conversations and be continuous in the project. But sometimes it just happens that it just gets pushed back.
Yeah.
It happens.
But
Yeah.
The earlier, the
Ashley
better.
can hook you up.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in, again, putting artists in front of the clients. I know that we are so over with time, so thank you for that last. Thank you all for bearing with us, being here.